I never believed that a single life from a child could destroy an entire family. If someone had told me 10 years ago that my 10-year-old marriage would end because of something my little daughter said, I would have laughed and called it impossible. But that was exactly what happened. My name is Joy. I was married to my husband. We had 2 children, a 6-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. Life wasn't perfect, but we were happy. My husband was a hardworking man. He wasn't rich, but he always made sure there was food on the table. Every weekend, he took the children out for ice cream or to the park. They adored him, especially my daughter. She was truly daddy's little girl. People often told us we looked like the perfect family. I believed them too, until one Friday afternoon. I came home from work earlier than usual. As I entered the house, I noticed my daughter sitting quietly on the couch, hugging her teddy bear. She looked worried. I sat beside her and kissed her forehead. "What's wrong, my princess?" I asked. She hesitated before looking at me with teary eyes. "Mommy." "Yes?" "Daddy said I shouldn't tell you." The moment I heard those words, my heart skipped a beat. She lowered her head. "Daddy always brings one auntie into the house when you go to work." I froze. My husband had never given me any reason to suspect he was cheating. I forced myself to stay calm. "What do they do together?" I asked softly. My daughter answered without looking at me. "They go into your bedroom and locked the door. Daddy said I must never tell you." My hands began to shake. I wanted to believe she was mistaken. Maybe she misunderstood something. Maybe it was a relative. But the fear in my heart refused to go away. That evening, I acted as if everything was normal. I smiled, served dinner. I even laughed at my husband's jokes. But deep inside me, my mind was racing. Who was this woman? Why would my husband tell our daughter to keep it a secret? And why would a 4-year-old make up a story like that night while everyone was asleep? I stared at the ceiling until morning. I had no idea that I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. And it all started with one question I decided to ask my husband the next morning. The next morning, I couldn't concentrate at work. My daughter's words kept echoing in my head. "Daddy always brings one auntie into the house when you go to work." I tried to convince myself that she was only 4 years old and had probably misunderstood what she had seen. But another voice in my head kept asking, what if she's telling the truth? The next 3 days, I watched my husband closely. He acted normal. He joked with the children. He called me during the day to ask if I had eaten. He even surprised me with my favorite snack on his way home from work. Everything about him looked innocent. Yet, I couldn't stop thinking about what my daughter had said. Late one evening, I decided to ask my daughter again. "Sweetheart, are you sure Daddy brings another woman here?" She nodded confidently. "Yes, Mommy." "How many times has she come?" "A lot." "What do they do?" "They talk, laugh, and then they go inside." "Inside where?" She pointed towards the hallway. "They closed the door." "Did Daddy tell you not to tell me?" "Yes." "What exactly did he say?" "He said it's our little secret." That was all I needed to hear. My heart broke. I couldn't sleep that night. I kept imagining another woman sitting in my living room, laughing with my husband while I was working hard to help pay our bills. The following morning, I pretended to leave for work as usual. Instead, I hid behind a nearby shop where I could clearly see our gate. My husband parked outside. He looked down the street before opening the gate. A few minutes later, a woman in a blue dress arrived. She smiled at him. He welcomed her inside. I felt my chest tighten. Without thinking, I ran towards the house. By the time I entered the compound, they were already inside. I pushed the front door open so hard that it hit the wall. The woman jumped in fear. My husband stood up immediately. "Honey, what are you doing here?" I looked from him to the woman. My eyes were filled with tears. "So this is why you've been pretending to be the perfect husband?" He took a step toward me. "Please calm down. This isn't what you think." I laughed bitterly. "Then explain why she's here." "I can explain everything." "No, my daughter already told me everything." The woman looked completely confused. She tried to introduce herself. "My name is—" "I don't care what your name is," I shouted. "Leave my house." She looked at my husband. "I think I should go." He nodded slowly. As she walked towards the gate, several neighbors were already outside. People whispered. I knew something like this would happen one day. I've seen that woman around before. So he's been cheating all this time. None of them knew the truth. Their words fueled my anger. After everyone left, my husband sat quietly on the sofa. "Honey," he said softly, we are making a huge mistake. If there's an explanation, let me give it to you. I folded my arms. You had your chance. He sighed deeply. I only asked for 5 minutes. You don't deserve 5 seconds. That night, I packed all his clothes into 2 large traveling bags and dropped them outside the gate. Our son cried and begged me not to send his father away. My daughter stood silently beside me, clutching her teddy bear. My husband looked at the children with tears in his eyes and he turned to me. I hope one day you will realize what you've done. Those were the last words he said before walking away. 2 weeks later, I filed for divorce. He didn't contest it. He simply signed the papers. Everyone praised me for being a strong woman. My friends called me brave. My family said I had done the right thing. I believed them. Months passed. I focused on raising my children and tried to forget my failed marriage. Then almost a year after the divorce, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, I nearly collapsed. Standing in front of me was the same woman I had thrown out of my house. She was holding a brown envelope. The first word made my blood run cold. I've carried this secret for too long. It's time you knew why your husband invited me into your home. For a few seconds, I couldn't move. The same woman I had humiliated in front of my neighbors was standing at my door, holding a brown envelope tightly against her chest. I know you don't want to see me, she said quietly, but I've lived with this guilt for almost a year. You deserve to know the truth. I wanted to slam the door in her face. Instead, I stepped aside. She walked in slowly and sat on the edge of the sofa. Neither of us spoke for a while. Finally, she placed the envelope on the table. Open it. With trembling hands, I pulled out the document. The first paper was a receipt for a plot of land. The second showed building approvals. Then I found architectural drawings of a beautiful 4-bedroom bungalow. Across the top of the first page were the words, Project Owner, Mrs. Joy. I frowned. My name? She nodded. Yes. I don't understand. She took a deep breath. I work for a construction company. Your husband hired us to build a house for you. I stared at her, unable to speak. He wanted to surprise you on your 10th wedding anniversary, she continued. He said you had sacrificed so much for the family that you deserved a home in your own name. I felt my heart pounding. No, that's impossible. He didn't want anyone to spoil the surprise, especially not your friends or relatives. That's why all our meetings were private. She pointed at one of the drawings. This was the kitchen you asked for years ago. He remembered every detail. Tears filled my eyes. The blue cabinets, she smiled sadly. He insisted on them because you once told him that they reminded you of your late mother. I covered my mouth. Only my husband knew that. Then she said something that completely broke me. The room you believed wasn't your bedroom. It was the study. Your husband converted it into a temporary office so we could spread out the building plans and paperwork. I couldn't breathe. Everything my daughter had said was true. A woman had been coming to the house. They had been closing the door. My husband had told her not to tell me, but the meaning behind those words were completely different from what I had imagined. As soon as the woman left, I called my daughter. She walked into the living room, now 5 years old, smiling innocently. I hugged her tightly. Sweetheart, do you remember telling me Daddy brought an auntie home? Yes, Mommy. Why didn't you tell me they were walking? She looked confused. I thought you already knew. You said they locked themselves inside the bedroom. She quickly shook her head. No, Mommy, not your bedroom. She pointed towards the small room beside it. The room with Daddy's computer. I closed my eyes. The study? She had never said it was my bedroom. I had assumed it. Then she looked at me with innocent eyes. Daddy said not to tell you because he wanted to make you happy on your anniversary. I thought surprises were supposed to be secrets. At that moment, I realized the terrible truth. My daughter had never lied. She had simply described what she saw. The lie was the story I created in my own mind. The next day, I went looking for my ex-husband. After asking several people, I found him at a small construction site where he had taken a new job. He looked thinner, older. There was a sadness in his eyes that I had never seen before. When he noticed me, he stopped working. What are you doing here? I burst into tears. I'm sorry. I know everything now. I know I destroyed our family. For a long time, he said nothing. Then he wiped the dust from his hands and looked at me. Do you know what hurts me the most? I shook my head. You believed a misunderstanding before you believed the man who stood beside you for 10 years. You didn't ask me a single question. You judged me, sentenced me, and ended our marriage without giving me a chance to defend myself. I fell to my knees and begged him to forgive me. Workers nearby stopped what they were doing to watch. I didn't care. I cried until I had no tears left. He helped me to my feet. I forgave you a long time ago, but forgiveness doesn't always bring people back. He pointed across the road. A woman was standing beside a car, holding the hand of a little boy. She smiled as she saw him. My wife, he said, and my son. My heart shattered into pieces. The future we had planned together now belonged to someone else. Before leaving, he handed me one last document. It was the deed to the unfinished building. I couldn't bring myself to sell it, he said. It was always meant to be yours. Every wall in that house reminded me of a marriage I had destroyed with suspicion. I broke down all over again. As I stood there watching him walk away with his new family, I misunderstood everything my daughter told me, and I pray to find peace again. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, share, and give me a follow.